The day my son graduated high school, he walked up to me before the assembly started, reached inside his gown, and pulled out a chain. My dog tags. The ones I wore on my last deployment. The ones I left on his dresser the morning I shipped out, when he was 4 years old and didn't fully understand why Mommy had to go. He didn't say anything. He just held them up, and I couldn't breathe. My name is Sarah. I'm 38 years old. I served 12 years in the United States Army, and I missed almost every single moment of my son's childhood because of it. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Kuwait. Trainings, relocations, months where I couldn't even tell my family what country I was in. I made that choice. I own it. But what I didn't choose, what I didn't know about until Marcus was 17 years old, is that someone spent an entire decade making sure my son believed I had chosen to forget him, and that someone was the woman his father married when Marcus was 6. Her name was Sandra, and this is the story of what she did, what it cost me, and how the truth finally came out in the last place I ever expected. I met my ex-husband Derek when we were both 21. We got married fast, the way young people do when they're in love, and not thinking about the fact that they barely know each other. Marcus came along 2 years later, and for a while, it was good, really good. But the Army was always part of who I was. I'd enlisted before Derek and I even met, and he knew that going in. When Marcus was 3, I got my first deployment orders, and things between Derek and me started to crack. We tried to hold it together. We didn't. By the time Marcus was 4, we were divorced. The custody arrangement made sense at the time. Marcus would live primarily with Derek since I was active duty, but I would have him every leave period, regular phone and video calls, and I could write as much as I wanted. Derek agreed. It was civil. We shook hands like adults. 6 months later, Derek started dating Sandra. I want to be careful how I talk about Sandra, because I know she's going to sound like a cartoon villain, and I need you to understand. She wasn't, not at first. She was pleasant on the phone. She was kind to Marcus in front of me. She sent me photos of him on his first day of kindergarten, which, yes, I was overseas for, and which I cried about alone in a bunk in a country I'm still not supposed to name. She seemed fine. I had no idea that the version of Sandra I was seeing was the performance, not the person. The first signs were small, like they always are. Around the time Marcus turned 6, the phone calls started getting shorter. Not drastically, just a few minutes less each time. Marcus would get quiet faster, like someone was standing nearby. When I asked him questions, his answers felt coached. Did you have fun at school this week, baby? Yeah. What was your favorite part? I don't know. Lunch, I guess. He used to tell me everything, every bug he found, every cartoon he watched, every fight he had on the playground. Now I was getting one-word answers and the sound of a television in the background. I told myself it was a phase. Kids change. He was getting older. I think about that a lot now. How many times I told myself it was a phase. I still remember the last phone call where he sounded like himself, really like himself. He was 7. He told me he lost his first tooth and that the tooth fairy brought him $2, and that he thought the tooth fairy might actually be his dad, but he wasn't totally sure, and did I know? I laughed so hard, I startled the woman in the bunk next to me. I had no idea that was the last normal conversation we were ever going to have. The shift happened gradually, and then all at once. By the time Marcus was 8, our calls had dropped from twice a week to once. I chalked it up to a busier schedule, school, sports, whatever Derek had going on. I was deep into a second deployment and didn't have the bandwidth to fight about it from 12,000 miles away. I wrote letters, a lot of letters. I've always been better on paper than on the phone. It's just how I'm wired. I wrote Marcus about the sky in Afghanistan, which sounds strange, but it's genuinely one of the most beautiful skies I've ever seen. I wrote him about the food I missed, the music I listened to at night, the things I was looking forward to when I got home. I drew little cartoons in the margins because he used to love my terrible drawings. I sent those letters to Derek's address, our agreed point of contact for Marcus. I never heard back. I assumed Marcus wasn't a letter-writing kid. I didn't push it. When I came home for leave that year, I drove straight to Derek's house. Sandra answered the door. She smiled. She offered me coffee. She told me Marcus was at a friend's birthday party and would be back in a couple hours. He's been doing so well, she said, in that warm, careful voice of hers, really settling in. He's such a happy kid. I'm glad, I said, because what else do you say? Marcus came home later that afternoon and he hugged me, but there was something off, something held back, like a hug you give someone you were told to hug. He was 8 years old, and my kid already felt like a stranger. Would you have pushed harder right then? Because I think about it all the time, whether I should have demanded answers in that moment, sat Marcus down, made Derek tell me what was happening. I didn't. I didn't want to make it a scene. I thought I was being the bigger person. I was actually just giving Sandra more time. By the time Marcus was 10, I was lucky to get him on the phone once a month. Every time I called Derek, there was an excuse. Practice. Homework. Marcus was sleeping. Marcus wasn't feeling well. I'd leave messages, and Derek would call back days later with vague apologies and vaguer updates. When I finally got Marcus on the line, he was polite in that distant way that means someone has been coached to be polite. I hired a family law attorney. She told me I could file for enforcement of the custody agreement, but that given my deployment schedule and the distance, a judge was unlikely to make dramatic changes. I could fight it, but it would be a long, expensive fight with uncertain results. I kept writing letters. I kept sending cards on birthdays. I kept depositing money into a savings account I'd opened for Marcus when he was born. And then, when Marcus was 12, he stopped taking my calls entirely. Derek told me Marcus had decided he needed space, that it was hard for him emotionally, that I should give him time. I gave him time. That was my second biggest mistake. If you've ever been the person who keeps trying while the door keeps getting smaller, you already understand what the next few years felt like. And honestly, I want to hear from you in the comments, because I genuinely wonder sometimes whether other people would have fought harder, pushed past it, forced the issue, or whether you too would have just kept writing letters into the silence and hoping, because that's what I did. I kept writing. Marcus never wrote back, not once in 5 years. By the time he was 15, I had accepted, or tried to accept, that my son had grown up without me in any real sense, that the distance had become something more permanent. I told myself I would try again when he was 18, when the court agreements didn't matter anymore, when it was just him and me, choosing whether we wanted a relationship. I didn't know Marcus was 15 and sitting in his dad's garage, opening a box he'd never seen before. I found out later, much later, that Derek and Sandra had a garage clean-out when Marcus was 15. They were getting ready to move into a bigger house, doing the full purge. Derek had rented a dumpster. Marcus was helping. He found a cardboard box shoved behind a water heater. It had his name on it in handwriting he didn't recognize. He opened it. Inside were 114 letters, birthday cards, holiday cards, drawings on wide-ruled notebook paper, a laminated copy of his first school photo with notes written in the margins. All of them from me. All of them dated. Some of them from countries he couldn't have pointed to on a map when I sent them. Not one of them had been opened. Sandra had been intercepting them. She'd never given him a single one. I want to pause here for a second, because when I tell this next part, I want you to understand that Marcus is a thoughtful, controlled person. He gets that from Derek, honestly, not from me. He does not yell, he does not blow up. But he sat in that garage for 2 hours reading every single letter before he said a word to anyone. And then he walked inside the house, found Sandra in the kitchen, and said, "How long have you been hiding these?" Sandra's answer, according to Marcus, was that she'd done it to protect him, that I was unstable, that the letters were upsetting to read, and she didn't want him to feel abandoned every time one arrived. She said this like it made sense, like it was the reasonable thing. Marcus called me for the first time in 3 years that night. It was 11 o'clock his time. I was already in bed. I picked up on the first ring because I always pick up for numbers I don't recognize. Old habit. Mom, I didn't move. I couldn't. Yeah, baby. I'm here. She hid your letters. His voice cracked on the last word. There's like 100 of them. I've been sitting here reading them for hours. I pressed my hand over my mouth. I didn't want to cry. Not yet. Not before I understood what he needed from that call. How are you feeling right now? I asked. I don't know, he said, confused. Really, really angry. That makes sense. I thought you didn't care. Mom, I thought you stopped wanting to talk to me. And that was it. That was the moment. 12 years of silence and distance, and one-word phone calls, and the weight of believing my own kid didn't want to know me. It all collapsed into that one sentence. I didn't stop crying for a long time. In the weeks after that call, everything started moving at once. Marcus confronted Derek. Derek, to his credit, claimed he didn't know about the letters, that Sandra had handled all the mail and he'd assumed I had stopped writing. Whether I believe that is a separate conversation. What I know is that Derek didn't protect his kid either way, and he has to live with that. Sandra tried to frame it as concern. She called me, actually, I know, I was shocked too, and launched into this long explanation about how she thought I was a bad influence. How she was just trying to give Marcus stability. How I should understand that she'd been his real mother figure for over a decade. I let her finish, I really did. Then I said, Sandra, I have one question for you. Was there ever a moment where you thought, maybe I should just ask Marcus what he wants? Silence. I'm going to send you the name of the family attorney I've been working with for 6 years, I said. She's been keeping records of every letter I sent, every call I made, every deposit into Marcus's account. I'd like to have a formal conversation about what you did. You can't, it's not illegal to. I'm not doing this because it's illegal, I said. I'm doing it because my son deserves to know someone fought for him. I hung up. I won't pretend what happened next was simple or clean. Nothing in real life ever is. Marcus and I started talking. Slowly at first, short calls, then longer ones. He asked me questions I answered as honestly as I could. Why did you enlist when you had a kid? Was it worth it? Did you ever think about getting out for me? I answered everyone, including the hard ones. I thought about getting out, I told him. More than once. But I also thought you were okay. I thought your dad was taking care of you, and that you just needed space from me. I was wrong to accept that so easily. I'm sorry. You didn't know, he said. I know. But I also didn't push hard enough when I felt something was wrong. I think I was scared of what the answer would be. He was quiet for a moment. Then, yeah, me too. We built it back. Not all at once, not without some really painful conversations, but we built it. Sandra and Derek divorced about 8 months later. I'm not saying I caused it. I don't know what happened between them. But I know Marcus pulled back from Sandra completely, and I know that Derek eventually acknowledged, in writing, that the custody agreement had not been followed. The night before Marcus's graduation, he called me. I want you to have something tomorrow, he said. What? You'll see. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I sat in those bleachers in my best dress, heart pounding like I was back on base waiting for orders. When Marcus walked across that stage, I cheered loud enough that the woman next to me actually laughed. After the ceremony, he found me in the crowd, and he reached inside his gown and pulled out that chain. My dog tags. I've had these since I found the box, he said. I figured you carried my name overseas. I could carry yours for one day. I held it together for about 3 seconds. Then I didn't. We stood there in the middle of that crowd, and I held my son for the first time in years. Really held him. And I thought about every letter I'd written in the dark, every birthday I'd missed, every phone that rang and never got answered, and I thought, he knew, he found out, he came back. That's the thing about truth. It has a way of surfacing, even when someone works very hard to keep it buried. I'm not going to tell you Sandra got what she deserved in some dramatic, cinematic way. Life doesn't always work like that. But I will tell you that my son is 19 now, and he texts me almost every day. He came and visited me for 2 weeks last summer. He's thinking about following me into service. I told him to take his time with that decision, to think it all the way through, because I know what it costs. He looked at me and said, "You did it, and you still showed up." I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't, really. What I know is this. I missed years I can never get back. I made choices I'd make differently if I could. And someone used my absence against my own child for a decade. But he wore my dog tags under his graduation gown, so I hope, we're going to be okay. If you've ever been kept from someone you love, or if you've ever been the kid who found out the truth too late, I hope this story meant something to you tonight. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have confronted her, or would you have just walked away? I still wonder sometimes if I did enough. If I should have fought harder, earlier, louder. But then Marcus texts me a picture of whatever he made for dinner, and I think, maybe fighting for them, even quietly, even from far away, is still fighting. Maybe it counts.